At 6:40 on Friday evening, 40 yellow school buses sat in 4 straight rows behind the North Line student transit depot. They had been washed, fueled, and assigned to Monday routes. None of them was moving. A red maintenance tag hung from every key on the dispatch board, each carrying the same instruction: "Do not dispatch." Daniel Mercer stood beneath the fluorescent lights with the final key still in his hand. As North Line's lead maintenance inspector, he could place a bus on temporary maintenance hold. Until that evening, he had never used that authority on 40 vehicles at once. Through the office window, the operations supervisor ended a phone call and turned toward him. North Line's chief executive was on her way to the depot. By Monday morning, the school district expected all 40 buses in service. Daniel had given the company 1 weekend to determine whether any of them could be released. Claire Bennett arrived 11 minutes later. Without removing her coat, she crossed the dispatch floor and stopped before the empty key slots. "Did you place this entire group on hold?" "Yes." "How many buses failed?" 2. Her attention shifted from the board to Daniel. "Then why am I looking at 40 tags?" Daniel placed the final key on the counter, leaving its red tag face up. Because one passed, that answer stopped her. Claire asked whether he believed every bus was defective. He told her the evidence did not support that conclusion. What it did show was harder to resolve. North Line could no longer identify which buses had been inspected correctly. Releasing any vehicle from the group would mean relying on records that did not match the maintenance bay results. Claire looked again at the 40 empty slots. She did not tell him to remove the tags. Instead, she asked to see the first test. 3 hours earlier, Bus 214 had been the final vehicle on Daniel's readiness list. All 40 buses had gone through the same parking brake service campaign during the previous 2 weeks. An outside vendor performed the work. North Line's maintenance staff conducted the final internal checks before the fleet entered the district's Monday schedule. Bus 214 should have taken less than 15 minutes when the test produced a result that prevented release. Daniel checked the vehicle's position, reset the procedure, and ran it again. The outcome did not change. A single failure could point to the vehicle, the adjustment, or the test itself before treating it as anything larger. He marked Bus 214 for reinspection and selected a comparison vehicle from the same campaign. Bus 227 had been serviced by the same vendor crew and carried the same component configuration. It failed as well. Rather than notify executive management with only 2 results, Daniel chose a third bus from the campaign. Bus 219 passed. Daniel ran the procedure once more before recording it. The passing result held. He checked the campaign labels on all 3 vehicles, then photographed each setup so a later reviewer could see that he had not changed the conditions to create a pattern. The evidence now resisted the simplest explanation. The test method could produce a clean result. Yet 2 buses documented as equivalent had not produced one. He remained beside it, moving between the 3 results and the campaign list. Had all 3 failed? The common service work would have been the immediate suspect. Had only one failed, he could have isolated that vehicle and continued. 2 failures beside 1 pass left him unable to do either. According to the campaign report, all 3 buses had received the same work, completed under the same procedure, and passed the vendor's checks. Their physical results no longer supported treating those records as equivalent. Daniel reported that the 3 buses could not be released and requested the complete campaign file. The operations supervisor reminded him that the Monday group was already in dispatch, and the district expected final confirmation that evening. Daniel's phone lit up with a message from the after-school program about its closing time. He changed the pickup arrangement, returned the phone to his pocket, and opened the campaign records. The adjustment cost him the dinner he had promised his daughter and required a neighbor to collect her. He did not enter either fact in the maintenance log. The record needed the reason the buses had stopped, not the cost of his staying. On the surface, the file was complete. Every bus had a work order, technician identification, completion entry, and inspection result accepted by North Line's system without exception. The first discrepancy appeared when Daniel placed the records for buses 214 and 227 side by side. Several required fields matched exactly not merely the pass designation, but the supporting entries in their order. Expanding the comparison to other fleet numbers produced the same pattern. The timestamps created a second problem. Separate work orders credited one technician with portions of multiple inspections during overlapping intervals, while the underlying test sheets that might have reconciled those entries were missing. A software export could repeat formatting or duplicate a default field. It could not demonstrate that the physical work had been completed correctly on each vehicle. Nothing proved deliberate falsification, and Daniel did not label it that way. The narrower conclusion was enough. Northline's records could not separate a properly inspected bus from one merely recorded as properly inspected at the bottom of each work order chain. The same pilot acceptance number appeared. That reference was not unusual by itself. A campaign often began with one vehicle establishing the approved procedure. What mattered was the absence of any separate trail showing how the later buses had been checked against it. If the pilot contained an unresolved assumption, every copied entry could carry that assumption forward without revealing it. Daniel moved the cursor over the link. After a moment, he pulled his hand away and opened the campaign summary instead. From the summary, Daniel selected all 40 buses. Northline's procedure allowed a lead inspector to place an affected group on temporary maintenance hold when reliable records could not separate exposed vehicles. It did not authorize him to issue an official state out-of-service order. It did allow him to prevent Northline from dispatching the buses. He set each proposed status to "Do Not Dispatch Verification Required," then attached the two failed results, the passing result, and a summary of the record discrepancies. The notification field required the operations supervisor and maintenance manager. Under normal escalation order, Daniel should have contacted the manager before initiating a group-wide restriction unless dispatch was imminent. Monday was more than 2 days away. A blue link to the pilot file remained visible beneath the attachments. Daniel moved the cursor past it, entered the manager's names, and submitted the hold. The dispatch board refreshed. All 40 fleet numbers changed from green to red. Only then did Daniel print the physical tags. Starting with the first row of keys, he matched each tag to its fleet number. Behind him, the office phone began to ring. He continued until all 40 keys carried the same instruction. The operations supervisor answered the first call and began reading Daniel's summary aloud to the maintenance manager. Daniel could hear the sequence being reconstructed behind him. 2 failures, 1 pass, duplicated entries, missing support. By the time he reached the last row, the electronic decision had become a management event he could no longer contain by closing the screen. The pilot file remained unopened. Its reference number appeared beneath every vehicle he had placed on hold. Claire reviewed the 3 results at a desk overlooking the maintenance bays. Bus 214 had failed twice. Bus 227 had produced a similar result. Bus 219 had passed under the same internal procedure. Beside them lay samples from the campaign file. The overlapping timestamps were obvious. Proving what they meant for the physical work required an inspector independent of both Northline and the vendor. Claire separated the documents into 2 stacks. The hold stays in place tonight. The 3 tested buses remain where they are. No adjustments, repairs, or new entries until an outside inspector documents their condition. Daniel agreed with that part. Claire would bring in a qualified commercial bus inspector Saturday morning, preserve the campaign records, and provide whatever access the inspector required. Any bus that received a verified inspection could be considered individually for return to service. Daniel looked at the 40 fleet numbers. A sample can tell us whether the problem exists. It can't clear the buses you don't inspect. I'm not proposing that it can. Her answer removed the argument he had expected. Claire's goal was to establish a defensible procedure, determine how much work each vehicle required, and learn whether any portion of the fleet could still be verified before the district's cutoff. Operations would calculate substitute capacity, and the district would receive notice of a possible delay. What time does the district need a firm answer? Daniel asked. Noon tomorrow for a full backup plan. Earlier if we know the group cannot be ready, and if the inspector clears 10, we give the district 10 verified buses and replace 30. We don't turn 10 good results into permission for 40. That answer settled the safety question between them. It did not settle the procedural one. Daniel pointed to the missing attachments until the original records were recovered. Vendor paperwork could not shorten the process. Claire slid that stack away from the test results. Then it won't. The hold was protected. Who would conduct Northline's side of the review remained unsettled. Claire asked Daniel to surrender his return-to-service credentials for the campaign group until the independent review was complete. She did not take his employee badge, remove him from the depot, or alter the 40 holds. He would preserve the test setup, identify every record he had reviewed, and brief the outside inspector when requested. He would not perform verification tests or authorize a release. The distinction was precise. It still left Daniel outside the work he had begun. He placed the credential card beside the 3 reports. Is this disciplinary? Not tonight. You reported the problem, performed the initial tests, and applied the hold. That makes you a necessary witness and the wrong person to validate your own decision. Claire explained that Shaw, not Northline, would choose the expanded inspection group and document the results. If Daniel's procedure was sound, the outside work would show it. If it was not, keeping him at the controls would only make the findings harder to defend. Daniel could not challenge the logic without weakening the standard he had asked her to enforce. He signed the equipment transfer log and listed the physical and electronic records he had reviewed. At the bottom, the field marked Additional Materials was blank. Daniel included the workstation path, the photographs from the first 3 tests, and the location of the printed campaign summary. Each entry narrowed the chance that a later disagreement could be blamed on a missing handoff. His pen hovered over it. Then, Daniel entered the pilot acceptance file number and returned the form. Claire checked the entry, but did not ask him to explain it. Not yet. By 9:15, Claire had converted the conference room above the depot into a document control area. She instructed Northline's systems administrator to preserve the campaign database, suspend edit permissions, and produce an access history. Paper records were collected, and the maintenance manager sealed the 3 tested buses against further work. Westbridge Fleet Services received a request for original test sheets, technician assignments, calibration records, and later corrections. Its regional manager replied that duplicated fields could have resulted from a batch upload. Claire forwarded the explanation to the outside inspector without accepting or rejecting it. The inspector could arrive at 7 Saturday morning. Claire notified the district's transportation director that Northline had identified discrepancies affecting a 40-bus service group. None would operate without verified inspection. She requested activation of the contingency plan. Within minutes, operations sent a replacement cost estimate. Even if enough vehicles could be found, weekend leasing and driver reassignment would erase the payment tied to Monday performance. A board member called to ask whether 3 questionable results justified notifying the district before outside review. Claire opened the contract's safety notification clause. The board member proposed waiting until Shaw reproduced a failure. If the outside tests passed, Northline could correct the database without creating a formal contract event. If they did not, the district would still have most of Saturday to activate its backups. Claire checked the contingency deadline. Waiting would preserve Northline's options by reducing the district's. The results alone might not have required disclosure. The inability to support 40 recorded inspections did. She confirmed that notice had already been sent. When Claire returned downstairs, Daniel's credential was logged. The files were read-only, and 40 red indicators remained on the dispatch screen. For the first time that evening, no one inside Northline could quietly make 1 green. Evelyn Shaw arrived at 6:52 Saturday morning with her own equipment and no interest in Northline's Monday schedule. Before examining a bus, she documented the condition of the 3 vehicles Daniel had tested, reviewed his procedure, and confirmed that no one had adjusted the relevant components overnight. Daniel answered questions but did not touch the equipment. Claire observed beyond the marked work area. Shaw began with Bus 214. Her results supported Daniel's decision not to release it. Bus 227 also required corrective work. Bus 219 met the applicable internal and manufacturer procedure, consistent with Daniel's passing result. The first 3 inspections confirmed the mixed pattern without identifying its boundary. Shaw selected additional buses herself, crossing service dates, technician assignments, and fleet number ranges. Some passed. Others presented discrepancies requiring adjustment or further evaluation. After each inspection, she sealed the result to its fleet number before moving on. Northline staff could position a vehicle and provide service information, but no one was allowed to substitute a different bus or revise a work order while the sample expanded. The process was slower than operations wanted and faster than an argument about whose records deserved trust. The pattern did not follow the campaign records. Claire asked whether any vehicle outside the inspected group could be released on its existing work order. The paperwork did not reliably show which physical checks had been completed, Shaw explained. While the expanded inspection showed that vehicles recorded the same way did not share the same condition. Existing records supported neither blanket rejection nor blanket release. Each bus needed an individual verified inspection. Corrective work required documentation and appropriate return to service review. Any official jurisdictional requirement remained separate from Northline's internal process. Claire asked whether Westbridge's batch upload explanation could account for the mismatch. It may account for duplicated fields, Shaw said. It does not tell me which work occurred. A clean database would not clear a failed bus, and a bad database does not make a passing bus defective. We inspect the vehicles and rebuild the record from what we can verify. Daniel's hold had prevented unverified buses from entering dispatch. It had not proved all 40 defective. Claire asked for the fastest defensible schedule. Shaw calculated the remaining hours against the fleet size. Her estimate did not include repairs, parts, or additional defects. Claire waited while she checked the figures again. Shaw set down her pencil. You won't have 40 verified buses by Monday. How many can I promise the district? None until I inspect them. Shortly after noon, Claire called the district's transportation director. Northline would not provide the 40 bus group for Monday service. The district could activate its backup plan. Instead of waiting through the weekend for an outcome, independent inspection could no longer support. The financial notice arrived before Claire even ended the call. The contractual consequences were immediate. Northline would pay the difference for replacement transportation, forfeit its launch performance payment, and submit the affected campaign to contract review. Claire authorized the expense and sent Shaw's preliminary findings. The transportation director asked whether Northline could commit a smaller number of buses and add more during the week. Claire said it could, but only one vehicle at a time after Shaw's process was complete. She would not give an estimate that operations might mistake for authorization. Across the operations floor, Monday's route assignments disappeared from the 40 fleet numbers. Drivers assigned to the group received reassignment notices. Some moved to substitute routes, others were told to remain available while the district coordinated outside providers. The operational damage spread without a dramatic announcement. One revised schedule and one canceled assignment at a time. Daniel watched the last one clear. The holds remained, as did the restriction on his return to service credentials. Independent testing supported his decision to stop the buses. It had not examined what he had done before Friday. Claire approached with a formal interview notice. The original campaign records are due from Westbridge this afternoon. I need you available when they arrive. Daniel accepted the notice without asking for his credential card. As Claire returned upstairs, the maintenance manager handed her Daniel's transfer log. One entry had been marked for follow-up. The pilot file number under additional materials. No one had asked Daniel to identify it. He had written it down anyway. Westbridge delivered the campaign archive shortly after 3 Saturday afternoon. Shaw opened it from a read-only copy while Claire and Northline's counsel watched the files populate the review index. Technician assignments, equipment logs, exported work orders, and a written explanation for the repeated entries. Counsel read the vendor's explanation first. They're attributing the duplicated fields to a batch upload. They acknowledge a documentation problem, but they maintain the physical work was completed. Does the archive prove that? Claire asked. Shaw selected one of the affected work orders and followed its attachments. The chain ended at the same pilot reference Daniel had identified. It proves where the later forms drew their information, she said. It doesn't prove what happened on each bus. The distinction still gave Northline a usable account. An outside vendor had produced unreliable records. Northline's lead inspector found the discrepancy before the buses entered service. Claire preserved the fleet, notified the district, and ordered independent verification. No student had boarded an unverified bus. Every statement was true. Together, they placed nearly all responsibility outside Northline. The preliminary report described a vendor documentation failure, a precautionary hold, and a verification plan. Daniel became the employee who stopped the fleet. Claire became the executive whose controls worked before the risk reached the road. The maintenance manager asked whether Daniel's escalation violation belonged in that report. Employment review. Counsel said, unless it connects to how Northline accepted the campaign. Shaw clicked the pilot reference. The system requested separate authorization to open the preserved file. Claire returned the preliminary report to the manager. Leave the conclusion open. Then she entered the authorization herself. 4 documents appeared inside the pilot file. Shaw opened the initial test and moved directly to the marked result. The vehicle had not produced the expected margin. "Does that establish a failure?" Claire asked. "Not from this file alone. I can't reconstruct every test condition." Shaw opened the next document. Westbridge's retest recorded a passing outcome and attributed the earlier result to a possible calibration issue. Claire searched the attachment list. "Where is the calibration record?" "There isn't one here." "Northline's exception." Shaw checked the linked records. Also missing. The timestamps placed the vendor retest and Northline's provisional acceptance less than an hour apart. Whatever the initial result represented, no surviving record showed that Northline had independently resolved it before allowing the campaign to proceed. Claire opened the acceptance form. The pilot number matched the reference Daniel had entered on the transfer log. Beneath the vendor retest, Northline authorized Westbridge to use the pilot procedure for the remaining vehicles, subject to final internal inspections. At the bottom of the form was Daniel Mercer's signature. Claire checked the audit history, employee identification, and archived version created at acceptance. Nothing indicated that the signature had been inserted later or copied. No qualification, linked exception, or limit on Westbridge's reliance appeared beside it. "Did he approve the other 39 buses?" she asked. "No," Shaw said. "He approved the procedure Westbridge used to service them. Daniel had not signed for work he never saw. He had accepted the starting condition from which the remaining work proceeded." Shaw added the unresolved result. Unsupported retest, missing exception, and signed acceptance to the external review file without assigning intent. Claire closed the preliminary report and opened a blank chronology. At the top, she entered the pilot test date 1 week before Daniel placed the buses on hold. Then she scheduled his interview. Daniel recognized the form before Claire turned the screen toward him. He sat across from her and Shaw in the document room, his employee badge on the table and his return to service credential logged elsewhere. The screen displayed his name, employee number, and signature. Claire asked whether it was his. Yes. Daniel explained that the pilot's first result had been close enough to the acceptance boundary for him to stop and ask Westbridge to inspect the adjustment and test equipment. The vendor reported a possible calibration problem and produced a passing retest. "Did you witness the calibration check?" Shaw asked. "No." "Did you repeat the test yourself?" "Not after their retest." The blank space where an exception note belonged occupied more of the screen than his signature. Claire asked why he had accepted the pilot. Daniel kept his attention on the signature. "Westbridge had a crew waiting to begin the other buses. If I stopped the pilot, the campaign stopped with it. And the campaign schedule was your responsibility. The final inspections were, keeping the vendor on schedule belonged to operations. But you considered the schedule when you signed." "Yes." Daniel indicated the retest. "They gave me a passing result and said the first came from a calibration problem. I told myself Northline's final checks would catch anything they missed." Shaw turned to the blank portion of the form. "Where is the exception note?" "There isn't one." "Why?" The interview timer continued counting on Claire's screen. Shaw waited with one hand beside the unsigned exception field, while Claire's pen remained above the next line of the record. Daniel reached for the water, moved it a few inches across the table, and left it untouched, because an exception would have stopped the campaign anyway. Claire lowered her pen only after the words were recorded. Shaw closed the vendor retest and left Daniel's acceptance form alone on the screen. No one had forbidden the note or ordered him to accept the retest. The pressure was visible in the waiting crew, blocked schedule, and 40 vehicles behind the pilot, but the signature remained his. Claire asked what he would have done if the final Northline checks had all passed. Daniel took longer with that question. "Release the buses." And the first result. It would still be missing from the record. The answer prevented Friday's hold from rewriting the week before it. Daniel had corrected the immediate risk only after physical results forced him back to a decision he had left undocumented. On Friday, when 2 buses failed and 1 passed, Daniel saw the pilot reference beneath the repeated entries. Claire asked why he had not opened it before applying the hold. He looked at the document he had avoided. "Because I already knew what I hadn't written." He had secured the buses before reporting the complete history. The hold protected the fleet. The delay protected him. Claire entered both facts into the record. Pending external review, Daniel would be placed on paid administrative leave and removed from inspection and release decisions. He surrendered his badge. The 40 buses remained on hold. After Daniel left, Claire returned to the chronology. His omission accounted for the unresolved pilot result. It did not explain why one provisional acceptance carried so much weight through Northline's process. She requested the internal messages attached to the campaign milestone. Reports measured completion by vehicles processed each day. Exceptions removed a bus from the completed column, delayed vendor payment, and reduced the department's readiness score. Claire had approved the reporting structure 6 months earlier. She stopped typing and reopened the dashboard specification. The interface had been built to make delays impossible to hide. Every completed vehicle raised the readiness score. Every unresolved exception pushed it down. The system did not instruct an inspector to ignore a questionable result. It did something quieter. It recorded the decision to stop as a failure to perform. Claire opened the internal audit log. Months earlier, an auditor had recommended separating safety exceptions from production performance metrics. The recommendation had been deferred until after the contract launch. Along with projects her office considered less urgent, her digital approval appeared beside the revised date. The approval had not been hidden in legal language. Claire had moved the project because operations needed the current dashboard through the contract launch, and the information team lacked capacity to rebuild it at the same time. The decision had looked temporary. Nothing in the log required the recommendation to be revisited before Westbridge began work. She searched for evidence that another executive had overruled her or that the auditor had withdrawn the concern. There was none. Claire moved the recommendation into the incident chronology. Westbridge had supplied records Northline could not trust. Daniel had signed around an unresolved result. Neither decision belonged to her. Her responsibility lay in the system that made both easier to leave unchallenged. She had approved it. Claire opened the board report. Its draft described Westbridge's records and Daniel's undocumented acceptance. Both belonged there. She added the dashboard specification, deferred audit recommendation, and her approval record to a second chronology. On her screen, 2 report folders sat side by side. One contained enough evidence to hold Westbridge and Daniel accountable. The other placed Northline's management inside the same investigation. Both were accurate. Only one was complete. On Sunday morning, Northline's counsel placed 2 reports before Claire. The shorter version disclosed the failed inspections, Westbridge's unreliable records, Daniel's undocumented acceptance, and the 40 bus hold. It recommended individual verification, vendor corrective action, and additional maintenance training. Nothing in it was false. The second report included the performance dashboard, deferred audit recommendation, and Claire's approval. It connected the campaign failure to a management system that treated safety exceptions as lost production. Northline's operations director favored the first version. Counsel rested one hand on the shorter report. This answers every question the district sent us. Westbridge produced records we can't support. Mercer accepted the pilot without documenting the exception. Northline found the problem, held the buses, and began corrective action. She moved her hand to the complete report, but did not open it. If we attach the dashboard history and deferred audit recommendation, we expand the investigation from this campaign to Northline's management controls. That may be the right decision, but it will not be a limited contract review after that. Claire looked at the stacks. Would the shorter report be false? No. Incomplete. Counsel considered the word, not within the scope the district gave us. Claire turned to the final page of the shorter report. Her signature line was ready. The operations director reminded her that a broad review could freeze new vehicle additions across the contract. Not only the 40 already held, routes supplied by unaffected buses could come under oversight, and lenders could treat the investigation as a material operating risk. Employees who had never touched the campaign might lose hours while Northline answered questions the district had not asked. Claire understood each consequence. That was what made the shorter report an option rather than a deception. She left both reports unsigned. The selective version could answer every question the district had asked. It would not answer the question Claire now knew the district needed to ask. Daniel received the interview summary at home Sunday afternoon. It accurately recorded his signature, missing exception note, and decision to accept Westbridge's retest. It also described him as the employee who later identified the discrepancies and stopped the fleet. He removed the last clause. In its place, Daniel added that he had recognized the pilot reference before submitting Friday's hold and had not disclosed the earlier anomaly until the formal interview. He attached a signed statement accepting responsibility for the delay. Without requesting reinstatement, he returned it to counsel. Daniel retained a copy without sending it to Claire directly. If Northline chose the narrower report, his statement would still place the missing history in the company's legal file. Whether it reached the district would no longer be a decision he could control, but whether he had disclosed it would be. At the depot, Claire read Daniel's revised statement but did not contact him. The complete report exposed Northline to wider review and placed her decisions before the board. The selective version remained defensible and ready for signature. Claire deleted its signature block. Before transmitting the complete package, she separated allegation from evidence. Westbridge's intent remained undetermined. Daniel's conduct was described through the signed statement and records, not a conclusion about motive. Her own approval was included with a dashboard and audit recommendation rather than framed as a confession. Completeness did not require exaggeration. She added Daniel's statement to the complete chronology, followed by the dashboard specification, audit recommendation, and her approval record. Then she transmitted the package to the district's compliance office and independent reviewer. Daniel did not know which report she sent. Claire did not know whether his statement would protect or end his career. Neither choice depended on the other. The district review took place Monday afternoon in a transportation office conference room. There were no reporters or public audience. The contract compliance officer sat across from Claire, Daniel, Northline's counsel, and Evelyn Shaw, a second reviewer joined by video to record corrective actions. Daniel's pilot form appeared first. He confirmed that the signature was genuine, described the unresolved result and missing exception note, and acknowledged that schedule pressure influenced his judgment. He did not accept responsibility for duplicated campaign records or inspections he had not performed. Claire submitted the governance attachments herself. The dashboard showed every unresolved exception, reducing readiness. The audit log showed that separating safety exceptions from production metrics had been deferred with approval from her office. The compliance officer looked up. Did this metric instruct Mr. Mercer to accept the pilot? No. Did you know about the unresolved result when he signed? No. The officer placed the dashboard specification beside Daniel's pilot form. Then explain why these records belong in the same incident report. Claire placed the complete chronology beside the selective draft. The narrower report identifies who made each decision. It leaves out the system that made stopping questionable work count as failure, while keeping the campaign moving counted as success. The officer looked between the reports. You understand that this broadens our review beyond Westbridge and Mr. Mercer to Northline's management controls and decisions approved by your office. Yes. Claire pushed the complete chronology across the table. That is the report I'm submitting. The officer marked the governance attachments for independent review. Northline remained responsible for backup costs. The 40 buses would stay on hold until each completed verified inspection, documented repair where necessary, and the applicable return to service process. The district required an independent governance review before deciding the remaining contract status. Daniel's employment review and Westbridge's investigation remained separate. The compliance officer set deadlines for Northline to produce an inspection roster, revised exception procedure, and independent management control assessment. No campaign vehicle could count toward contract readiness until its supporting record was accepted. The district reserved the right to expand sampling to unaffected portions of Northline's fleet if the governance review found the same controls there. Daniel asked whether his statement would become part of the contract record. The officer confirmed that it would, along with Claire's attachments and Shaw's findings. There would be no version in which the hold appeared without the pilot decision that preceded it. Claire signed the corrective action acknowledgement. Daniel signed his interview statement. The review moved to the next item. Over the next 6 weeks, Northline operated with fewer buses and more inspectors. Backup providers covered the missing routes. Northline paid the additional costs and lost the launch payment. Its remaining contract stayed active under review, with new reporting requirements and outside oversight attached to every campaign vehicle returned to service. Westbridge disputed portions of the findings. Its investigation remained open. The 40 buses did not return together. Some passed verification without repair. Others required adjustment, new documentation, and a second review. Each moved through dispatch separately, its red status changing only after supporting records were accepted. Claire's board retained her while the governance review continued. The performance dashboard was suspended, and safety exceptions were removed from production scoring before a replacement system could be approved. Daniel's administrative leave ended with a formal disciplinary finding. He had failed to document the pilot exception and delayed disclosing its relevance. Northline offered a maintenance position without return to service authority while it rebuilt the inspection structure. The offer preserved his employment, but not the responsibility he had held before Friday. Accepting it would have placed him beside inspections he could advise on but no longer approve. Under a corrective system built partly around his own failure, Northline did not owe him restoration simply because the later hold had been right. He declined. The decision did not remove Northline's finding. Daniel accepted a position with a municipal fleet shop across the county, outside the school bus contract and Claire's authority. On his final visit to Northline, he returned the last equipment assigned to him. Bus 214 waited near the bay door with its verified return-to-service record clipped beside the key. The original red tag was gone. Claire found Daniel at the dispatch board after its status changed to green. Several fleet numbers remained red. "The first hold was yours," she said. The process that cleared it wasn't. That was the point. She gave him a copy of the completed corrective action record. It preserved both findings: his decision to stop the campaign and his earlier failure to document the pilot. Daniel looked through it. "You could have submitted the shorter report. So could you." Neither treated the exchange as forgiveness. Daniel thanked her for not making his signature the entire story. Claire answered that he had prevented her management record from remaining outside it. For 6 weeks they had communicated only through counsel, reviewers, and corrective action records. Nothing in the investigation had created a private understanding between them. What stood at the dispatch board was narrower. Each had seen the other submit evidence that would have been easier to omit. The direct reporting conflict no longer existed. The district review still did. Claire did not ask him to reconsider the Northline position. "When this review is closed, I'd like to have a conversation that isn't part of an investigation." Daniel glanced toward the buses awaiting verification. When the last red tag comes down, it was not a promise about what followed. It was a boundary both understood. Outside, Bus 214 pulled away from the maintenance bay for its first scheduled non-passenger operational run. Its fleet number turned toward the depot gate while the remaining buses stayed in place. One verified vehicle had returned to service. 39 decisions remained.